Don't get spooked. How to avoid getting sued for talking about paranormal and unusual and criminal activity on your podcast. Hello and welcome to Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and this podcast is for you if you are serious about podcasting, whether it's in your business or as a career or as a sideline. I'm sharing tips and strategies and advice on how to protect and grow and profit from your podcast. So let's get started. Today's topic comes from inside the Legit Podcast Pro Facebook community. We got this question from one of our podcasters. He says, "Happy holidays, everyone. My colleague has some concerns, so I'm asking on his behalf. Part of our podcast involves us telling things that are not just true crime, but things like maybe paranormal stories like Bell's Canyon or the story of the Mary Celeste. And then we debate and talk a little about them. My friend is concerned about any legal hits. Do we still need permission to tell these stories? Any answers or feedback are very appreciated." Well, first off, thank you for a great question and for being a part of the Facebook community. Anybody can join. It's called Legit Podcast Pro. And just head on over to legitpodcastpro.com if you're interested in a little more information about that. But let's get into this question. Let's dissect it just a little bit. There are a few kinds of legal theories or claims that could conceivably come up in a situation like this. They generally fall into two sort of categories: the intellectual property and the personal dignity related stuff. So, intellectual property are the areas of law that protect products of your mind, creative work, copyrights, trademarks, and patents. Now, in this scenario, we're not going to worry about patents because that's inventions and things. And I actually don't think trademark law really comes into play either, as long as you're not deliberately disparaging a brand or a company with false information about their products or services. So we'll talk about the copyright stuff. Copyright protects original works of expression, things like stories, plays, songs, poems, films, podcasts, works of art like paintings, sculptures, and so on. So to put it simply, just don't copy other people's stuff. If someone's written an article about Bell's Canyon, for example, it's not okay to just read that article into your microphone or camera. But it is okay to relate the same facts and the ideas contained in the article as long as you do your research. Read up from other sources, distill those facts and ideas out so you're not just copying from a single source. And by the way, merely paraphrasing from a single source, even if you're not copying the exact words, that is plagiarism, even if it's not copyright infringement. Now, this has unfortunately come up several times in the past few years, particularly in the true crime genre of podcasts. Sponsors have backed out, and some podcasts have even been discontinued as a result of the blowback. Not to mention the embarrassment the podcasters suffered when they get called out by the original journalists that wrote the source material articles that they worked with. And bottom line, it's dishonest, even if you don't get sued. Frankly, it's also unethical and immoral, and it'll come back and bite you eventually. So, protect your reputation by doing the work and developing your material independently. Now, this is not to say you can't use sources. Just don't rely solely on one or two, and do your own work, and where appropriate, credit those sources by naming them and linking in your show notes and things like that. Oh, and copyright also protects things like sound recordings. So if you use audio clips or music or sound effects, be aware that those belong to someone and you need permission or a license. Next up, we come to those personal dignity things. Defamation is the big one here. This is called libel when it's in a podcast, or slander when it's just spoken in a smaller personal setting. If you make a false statement that purports to be factual and it causes harm to a person's reputation or business or income, you could be liable to them for money damages. So stick to the truth. Fact check things. And if you are sharing rumors, speculation, and whatnot, be really clear that that's what you're doing. Because jokes and opinions and speculation, things like that the audience doesn't actually believe are factual, well, those aren't defamatory. And it's never a problem to actually tell the truth. So tell the truth. Also, if the events that you're talking about come from a long time ago and the people involved are no longer living, then it is okay to talk about those things. It's okay to speak about people who are no longer living because you can't defame a dead person. Now, privacy is another kind of personal dignity theory that can sometimes come into play here. The intrusion variety of privacy deals with actually entering into a person's solitude or seclusion in a way that's offensive to a reasonable person. Now, that's not likely to be an issue for most podcasts unless you're recording them in a private place when they have an expectation of privacy. The false light kind of privacy claim arises when you cast a person in a false light that embarrasses or causes them harm. Now, this can come up if you're talking about a person and implying or suggesting that they were involved in something they shouldn't have been or did something unseemly. Again, fact checking is your best tool to avoid this. But also, just use common sense. Don't say or publish information that could harm a living person's reputation or relationships or business, even if it could be true. Only do it if you're sure it's true. Now, the next theory in privacy is the public disclosure of private facts. Revealing someone's legally private information could lead to this kind of a claim. Doxing and outing a person could result in this, or privately recording someone could also take us there. And revealing someone's educational records, health records, history, health history, sexuality, sexual history, those kinds of things, those are all protected, unless they're a matter of public concern or publishing them serves an overriding public interest. So, for example, someone who's running for office or is in office and claims they were a star student or that they're in perfect health, yeah, go check their records. Make sure they're not lying. But think hard. Does this thing that you're publishing really serve the public interest, or is it just sensationalism? Now, in the paranormal and true crime spaces, a lot of the statements you use could come from interviews. Now, just because someone else is the interviewee and makes a statement, that does not insulate you, the podcaster, from liability. You have to still fact check everything, even if it's coming out of somebody else's mouth. And unless it's a joke or an opinion, and it's clear that that's the case, just make sure that you're checking the facts and making sure things are true. Now, I know that in this scenario, it said you're just talking about these stories. And that's great. But I just want to add one more thing to think about if you were to actually go to the places where these events occurred. You have to be mindful about trespassing, and you might even need permits or releases from the owners to film or record there. So just don't overlook that kind of thing. And that is it for this episode. I hope I'll see you again really, really soon. And yeah, before I forget, in just a couple of weeks, I'll be holding my workshop, Business and Legal Fundamentals for Podcast Growth and Profit. Registration hasn't fully opened up yet, but it is coming up soon. And in the meantime, I've got a wait list. And if you'd like an invitation as soon as the registration opens up, head on over to gordonfiremark.com/waitlist. And until next time, I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and this has been Legit Podcast Pro. Thanks.